Good morning, everybody, and welcome to day 13 of the VID21 conference. My name is Julia Still, the creator and host, and wherever you are joining from in the world, welcome. It's hard to believe we are day 13 already, and we are kicking off today with an amazing speaker, someone I've known for a number of years. And we originally met when she was an executive at Telstra. I'm now talking about the amazing Katherine Boiciuc. Katherine enables leaders and their teams to be future ready and thrive among the ever increasing complexity that leaders face. She's an associate director at Maximus International and recognised as one of Australia's 29 inspirational women making waves in STEM. As a global leader with extensive experience in the technology and telco industries, Katherine has held senior and influential roles focused on global impact and world technology enablement. She joined Maximus after 19 years with Telstra, where her team across 20 countries delivers services such as risk and compliance, strategy execution, customer experience strategy and NPS measurement, and digital enablement, including the deployment of Tableau, Salesforce, and Einstein. She has a rich catalogue of blogs and articles on mentoring advice to women in digital data, STEM, and technical leadership roles. She's also an advocate and global keynote speaker on diversity and technology, women in tech, and women in data for over a decade. Passionate about enabling leaders to be future ready, she's an accredited futurist and is featured in the Futurist World on the topic of future of leadership. KB, or Katherine, I know you as KB, but welcome to VID this year. It's so great to have you. You are going to talk about leading organisations with a future focus. And so where do you want to start apart from the future?
Thanks for having me, Julia. It's so excited to be here. Today, I wanted to have a conversation that looks at leadership beyond 2020. I think that what we've seen is a real shift in how we're thinking about leadership, our expectations of leadership. I think that the pendulum has swung. I think that we're clearly into 21st century leadership now. So I just wanted to kind of walk through and have a conversation about what some of those things are that we're seeing and noticing that's different about leadership now, and what do we do about it in terms of being clear for ourselves so that we don't slip back. Many clients that I'm working with right now are talking about life pre-COVID, life during COVID, and then that they've entered into 2021 and there's almost been this lull in energy. Leaders are tired, their organisational culture is tired, and they're looking for the leaders to not do a repeat of 2020. So they're looking for a different level of inspiration, a different level of clarity, and that requires leaders to lead differently. Otherwise, we're going to do a repeat. And I think that our people deserve better from us, and they deserve us to take our leadership for a workout. That's the intention for the next hour. Give our leadership a workout like we're taking it to the gym. And whether you're watching this live or as a recording, I hope you enjoy the session. So as Julia mentioned, I work with a leadership firm. We are a pure leadership consultancy, and we really care about three things: the real, the curious, and the resolute. So we're not here to have a conversation that is about hypotheticals or things that we haven't seen in practice. We're here to have a genuine conversation about what we're truly seeing in the market about leadership. A year ago, this was the type of message that firms were sending out to leaders. It was a call to action. We saw major crisis, but we were actually saying to leaders things like, have the curiosity to care. It's a once in a 100-year pandemic, but have the curiosity to care. Make sure that you're connecting with your people. Make sure that you're constantly seeking and driving clarity within your team, and make sure you keep a focus on activating performance and driving productivity. Like at some point, everyone hitting pause on life is not going to be sustainable, and you're going to need to make some judicious choices. And that might have worked. That was absolutely the right response in an emergency type settings that we were in last year, but it is not the style of leadership that your we are noticing workforces respond well to. And that's not to say that you shouldn't care and you shouldn't have connection and presence and you shouldn't be creating clarity, but our teams want more. They want more inspiration, they want more purpose, and they want more connection. And interestingly, when under pressure, we've noticed that organisations actually really stood up to the test of what was 2020. And so we saw bright spots really emerge. We saw that under pressure, interesting things happen around inspiration and when you anchor to purpose. And so what I found really interesting is that organizations that took a moment to pause and say, this is our purpose, this is how we could create value in the moment right now, let's mobilize, saw an access of discretionary effort. So whether it be, you know, a Brazilian beer brewery turning into a sanitation plant, not probably the intended goal of 2020 heading in. I'm pretty sure that wasn't in the 5-year strategic plan. However, something to be really proud of and really purpose-based, which allowed people to mobilise quickly. And so as we look back, one of the bright spots from 2020 in terms of leadership was those organisations that took a moment to say, how could we shift our purpose? How could we do more than what we're doing right now to have a different outcome? And so I think it's worth noting that it didn't change regardless of sector. Like whether you were Chris Hemsworth launching a fitness app, whether you were a beer brewery, whether you were WhatsApp and you were creating a new bot to counter misinformation, the innovation is there as when leaders allow it to surface in a way that's anchored to purpose. So when we think about more broadly, what are you focusing on right now? This is what I hear a lot, right? I still have people that are right now. I was, spent time this week with Emergency Services Victoria and government departments, and they're focused on immediately addressing business continuity. How are they going to support New South Wales? That we have another crisis to respond to. I hear from other leaders that we're really focused on establishing new and virtual ways of working. We still haven't got it right. We would like people to come back to the office 2 days a week or 3 days a week. We can't get people to come back more than one day a week or at all. Like we're missing each other. Our expectations in our new way of working of what we want the workforce to do and what they are doing is not aligned. I'd be curious to see what's coming up for you in terms of the conversations you're having or the things that you're thinking about. I don't know if you wanted to post in the chat or come off mute and let me know.
I'm still seeing a lot of people talking about the mechanics of how they work rather than the outcomes that they're looking for. Like it looks like 2 days a week. Jill, you've unmuted yourself as well.
Yeah, I'm still seeing workplaces dealing with the PTSD of COVID. And so there's still many of the businesses I work still haven't got the bandwidth to think about 2021 yet. They're still thinking about, what's happened rather than what could happen.
Yeah, it's a great point, Jill, because quite often, and I had this conversation with a client this week, quite often teams are coming together or back together for the very first time, if they're in a position and not in New South Wales flooded, or still in lockdown if you're outside of Australia. There are teams that grief is a contact thing. And so what happens is you think you've had your team workshops and you've had your kickoffs and they've been done in a virtual way. And when you bring the teams back together in person, there is a grieving that happens. I'm noticing in a lot of my face-to-face facilitation that even though they've had a conversation about last year, the act of coming into the office and sitting down and going, oh my goodness, like what just happened? There is so much that people have actually been holding within that you haven't seen through the screens. And we had some, very emotional kind of grieving, like repatriation almost conversations about I'm not the same person I was when you saw me in the office a year ago. Like I've changed significantly and this was my experience. And it's really important for organisations and leaders to ensure that they're taking the time with their teams to repatriate and the time with their teams to grieve and honour each other's COVID experiences so that they can turn their attention towards the future, because pretending it didn't happen is really unhelpful. I'm sure you've probably seen a combination of both, Jill.
And I'm also wondering, when I've been working with teams, Katherine, whether it's also about them re-establishing their rules of engagement. Sorry, I'm off screen. I'm in a very low internet area, so having my video on makes a difference to me being able to hear you. But yeah, I'm wondering for some teams whether it's about them having to re-establish rules because they have got new priorities and they've re-established their personal values during this time of separation. Wondering what you think about that.
I have been making it a point with every client to reset accountabilities, reset authority, reset approvals, reset cadence levels, because you can't assume that they are what they were pre-COVID. So I think that leaders that are assuming that this is just a physical relocation thing and not what we call a 3R, which is kind of, how do you retrofit? How do you retrofit what your team needs to execute in a way that serves them based on their entire way of working changing? How do you ensure that you create ways of working that's sustainable, that your team is comfortable with the way they communicate, the way they execute, what's live work versus not live work and can be done autonomously? And what are those things that need to be completely reimagined, that you just went, actually, you know what? Our business continuity serves us from Monday to Thursday, and we actually don't have effective business continuity from Friday through to Monday morning. And so understanding that there is more than just moving people back into the office. There's more than just a repatriation to the office here. You actually have to look at what you readjust and what you need to reimagine as well. And it's across expectations as well as accountability and your operating cadence. I think it's almost like you're starting again.
Karina, is there something you wanted to add? I can see you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, we work in the construction industry as consultants to projects, and the government stimulated the economy through construction. It was already busy beforehand. So for us, work was busy and then it just got even busier. So it just, being able to deal with that remotely and, as you say, some people, choose to stay remote. And we try to be a really flexible organisation, but how to deal with that as leaders when you're super busy anyway. And then just I think one of the things that you mentioned was about grieving, and it's I think that's really valuable, that actually acknowledging that that there has been a big change in our whole work situation.
Yeah,
on many fronts.
Absolutely. And I didn't realize how much, but half my firm that I work in are psychologists, either individual psychologists, practicing psychologists, or organizational psychologists. And the number one risk we saw coming into 2021 was unattended PSD, unhonoured experience, and that leaders globally are not psychologists and they're not actually equipped to have a conversation about repatriation that is beyond task. Really great people leaders will have a whole of person conversation, but that there is a tendency towards what I call 20th century leadership. And we'll talk about that, and we'll talk about what we can do. What are some of the things that you can advise your people to do as I get.
And I think it's the, who cares for the carers? So they're, we're the leaders in the organisation, but who's leading us and who's caring for us?
Yeah. It's a great question. That's genuinely why I'm doing the work I'm doing with the leaders I'm doing it with. It's with organisations that have said we need to bring in support. And I think that we're going to see more of it. I genuinely think we're going to see more leadership capability investment for the next 2 to 5 years than we've seen in the last decade. And it's not going to be about compliance training, and it's not going to be about performance training. It's going to be soft skills. It's going to be about courage. It's going to be about wisdom. It's going to be about pivoting. It's going to be about how to read signals in people and in the market. It's going to be a very different skill set, but I'll talk about those things as well. I'm conscious I want to make sure we get to a couple of other conversations in our time together, so I'll move forward. When we think through what it could have meant for leadership and the way to think about the models, the thing that I noticed last year was there were leaders that were on the what I call traditional VUCA. So they were like, they could understand what was volatile. They could understand what they didn't have certainty on. They could call out if there was complexity that they couldn't untangle. They could call out that there was ambiguity and that they had grey. And the ambiguity, I would say, was at its highest levels than people have probably experienced since the SARS pandemic or since the GFC. The second GFC, the most recent GFC, I should say, I've been working with leaders that have done 2 GFCs, and they remind me of that frequently, that there's been more than one. However, the role of leaders now is to actually not perpetuate or allow people to stay in a state that allows them to see volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. Your role as a leader is to reframe VUCA. So when you see that there's volatility, your role is to anchor them to purpose. Your role is to say, this is the situation. I understand that it can feel volatile, but we're going to ride the wave of this volatility because the outcome that we're seeking to achieve is X. So every time a leader sees volatility, it's an opportunity to convert it into a vision creating, anchoring to purpose conversation. Every time you see people, teams, other leaders having uncertainty, how do you take that moment to truly not walk past it and spend time with that individual and convert that moment of uncertainty into understanding? And sometimes it's as simple as saying, I know that we don't know, and I know that things are uncertain, but I hear you, and I commit to getting an answer for you. I don't know when I'm going to have the answer, but I will take ownership of this uncertainty so that people aren't carrying the worry. Because there was so much worrying happening in 2020 that it was exhausting. You're worrying about if you were going to be able to get your food delivered. You were worried about, the well-being of your family. People were worried about economic income. There was so much worry. The way to deflate that is to convert understanding and uncertainty into understanding. Complexity, I think, is really simple in that when you see complexity, take the time to pull it apart until you achieve clarity. Because complexity is simply lots of layers of conversations and decisions that create dirty water. You can't see the way forward. And so clarity is about time. And so when you mentioned, Karina, what do we do when we're so busy and we don't have that time to have those clarity moments? That's the biggest risk, that you will actually miss the big moments of creating clarity for people, of calling out people to slow down so that they can achieve clarity on what's important versus the next thing on the to-do list or the next email in their inbox, so that they can be more considered about what they're doing. And finally, ambiguity. I think that whenever we have ambiguous times, and we're going to continue to have ambiguity, it's not a new concept. It's just, I think, been really supercharged since 2020 because of the amount of sector and mega trend disruption that's causing around the globe, as well as economic disruption, is that our ability as leaders to be agile and reorientate has completely changed. Like, I would spend the majority of my time helping leaders build that muscle, build their ability to go, right, boat's been capsized for the 15th time this month, because you have to go within, right, to re-psych yourself up, to go again and reorientate and get clarity again. And so it's a different level of skill than allowing your team to sit in just, I don't know. And the other thing we learned coming into this year is our people expect a faster turnaround from when they identify ambiguity and that they don't have clarity and when we respond. So working in a hybrid way of working or a virtual way of working, the time continuum is different. So if you're working and seeing everyone and physically seeing everyone every single day, your contact allows you to maintain currency around that problem that's been raised. So in face-to-face environment, ambiguity in 5 days is manageable. In a virtual context, ambiguity for 5 days has turned into a mountain of pain, disruption, concern. It's been talked about, it's been WhatsApped, it's been the velocity it gains and the momentum it gains in the short amount of time. It can be really culture destroying. It can really undermine your organizational culture if you leave ambiguity there for too long. So it's a different way of thinking about it. I might just pause and see if there's any questions before I move on to how we innovate and how we look to reimagine leadership.
No question for me, but great clarity. Thank you.
Most welcome.
I love this VUCA 2.0. I think I wasn't a fan of VUCA before COVID came along in terms of how it framed where we were going. I like the 2.0 and the positive reframe and sort of sets where we should be focusing.
Yeah, well, it becomes a thing to a model that you can just go, oh, okay, when I see that, I do this. When I see that, I do this. It's a nice enabling frame. We might turn it into a little toolkit, Julie, that we can post up afterwards on the referencing. So let's move towards innovation and reimagining leadership. First things first, we're going to hear a lot about innovation for the next couple of years and transformation, like the new buzzwords. If pivot was the word of 2020, transform and innovate are probably front runners for the most annoying words for 2021. But the reality is that the disruption in the sector and in the market economically requires us to be very, very clear about what path we are choosing as leaders. Are we maintaining steady state? Are we looking to innovate our core? Are we looking to transform materially a new sector? And so thinking about where your team plays and having a really solid understanding. Innovation is no longer just for the strategy teams or the product teams or the technology teams. As a leader, understanding the commercial context of the business you are running and what journey they are on. Are they on a transforming the core journey? Are they on an adjacency journey? Are they on a truly we are transforming? Like if I think about, you know, Stage Kings and ISO Kings turning from production event organization into also now spinning off a furniture organization, they genuinely are now maintaining, they've doubled the size of their business. They've gone, okay, our core died, we're going to transform into a furniture business. And now that the market's come back on and events are coming back, we're going to, you know, breathe life back into Stage Kings. And we've now doubled the size of the firms. But they were very clear on that. They were very clear with their teams that this is what we were going to do. They were very clear that they were turning themselves into Australia's largest desk manufacturer in 2020. And so being clear on what your innovation narrative is as a leader and your business context is really important, because it helps you provide clarity and how you shift your leadership. And when I say shift your leadership, I'm talking about moving to 21st century leadership. We have seen really great examples and really ordinary examples of 20th century leadership and 21st century leadership across all sectors, right from the politics in Australia to around the globe. You're seeing leaders that have really stood up in a 20th century way, and you've seen leaders that have stood up in a 21st century way. And the reason why I talk about the future of leadership and why it's such a passion of mine is I found myself learning and being an executive in a leadership structure that was built upon the shoulders of many generations of men that were exhibiting 20th century style leadership. And as a leader myself, I found it very difficult to maintain my style of leadership, which is much more 21st century in nature. It was much more focused on purpose. It was much more focused on having an abundance mindset. It relied on a huge amount of networking and collectivism. It relied on a disproportionate amount of trust and deep relationships with the people that I worked with, and that we activated performance through activism as opposed to control. It's a different style, and you see it, right? You see Jacinda Ardern, you see leaders that are exhibiting this style of leadership, and you just go, why would I, like, if you had a choice between the two as a leader, which one are you choosing? Are you consciously choosing the type of leader you want to be, or are you role modeling 20th century leadership? Because that's what you've seen CEOs do and politicians do and so many people do for decades, that you don't know that there's another way. And for me, I think that once you, my goal is to convert as many people as I can to let go of the control, let go of the power, let go of the ego, let go of the scarcity mindset and the fear and the kind of toxic energy that comes with 20th century style leadership, and start to embrace what's possible, and the joy and the excitement and the energy and the momentum that comes with being a 20th century style leader. So I might just pause and see if there are any questions or comments.
Jill's saying in her work in leadership, she talks about control being an illusion.
Control is absolutely an illusion, but it's an investment of energy. So do you invest your energy in control, which is, by the way, an illusion? You never had it to begin with. Or do you invest your energy in building trusted relationships? Because you will achieve a much higher level of outcome through executing via building trust than you will through executing by pretending that you can control people and just generally making other people triggered in a certain way. And that's the reality. That is the reality of the shift. You only have, we are finite, right? We are finite in the amount of time we have as leaders, but we also have a choice on where we invest our energy, because energy is the dimension that you have to lever. Energy is renewable. You can recharge your energy just by choosing to invest your energy differently in a renewable way, as opposed to a way that's constantly draining us. Are there any other questions or comments around what reimagining leadership looks like?
Part of me wishes we were there already, but I like that we're having the conversation. It's a good start.
It's true, right?
It is.
I'm just like, hurry up already. But you
Yeah.
see it. You're seeing it with the AOC in the US. You see, like, there's so many leaders. You're seeing it with like a Pip Marlowe, right? You're seeing a number of leaders around the world that are starting to really demonstrate, particularly that high future, high focus on the future, high context, anchored to purpose. And you're also starting to see the market expect more from leaders too. Like, people won't buy the perfectly curated, I'm not going to show imperfection, make mistakes, because you don't have trust. The inhumanness of 20th century leadership is no longer palatable. The good thing about 2020 is it gave us children running in and Zoom screens and physically seeing more of who our leaders were, that perhaps were more curated in how they showed up in the world. And that I'm really grateful that, what was a moment of horror for a BBC presenter on TV around having a child run away from the nanny, right? That was a moment of horror, and that has been so normalized. I'm so grateful for the next generation of parents that is so. So how do we think about it? One simple way to begin, because reimagining leadership feels like a whole lot of responsibility, but how could you just go, actually, what's one way I can think about democratizing leadership and democratizing the leaders that I work with to create a more 21st century style of leadership inside my organization? And I'm a fan of formulas. Like, I like 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. I just do. I know that what I get in is what I get at the end. And so there are a couple of formulas I will share with you today. The first is democratising leadership. Democratising leadership is possible. And it's possible through four things need to be present. People need to understand their purpose. They need to have clarity on the job to be done. They need to have been given the capability to create courage for themselves and others. And don't worry, I will have a conversation about courage today. And finally, they know that they have the skills and the capabilities to execute. If those 4 things are present, you will create conviction inside your organisation. And conviction is what is required for what I call the middle, the belly of the organisation to rise. We don't need the 10 people at the top of organisations determining the future for everyone that sits within the organisation. We actually need to democratise leadership and allow for people that are closest to customers, that are closest to seeing value creation. We need them to feel like they are equipped and that they have conviction. And if we do that, that is actually the tipping point to mobilise an organisation in terms of momentum. So when I think about what does that mean for us and how to begin, I'm keen to hear either by the chat or coming off mute, where do you see, based on where you are, either for yourself or the organisation you work with or support, where are the opportunities, obvious ones that you see to reimagine leadership in your sphere of influence?
I'd like to say that having where we are redefining our purpose, but having it really clearly articulated, and I think coupled that with the courage to have the whole team buy in, in case they reject it. Does that make sense?
It does. My wondering would be more about, why would a culture reject a purpose if it was a reflection of their purpose? To me, that's my curiosity in your response.
I think that's about personal stuff. Going back to childhood. Is my idea any good? I think if it's actually articulated, then probably would be very clearly accepted. But I think it's we turn up as leaders with a whole lot of baggage, I think, and that's where the courage comes in.
Correct. Hey, Nash.
Hi, I'm driving. I just wanted to answer your question. I think leaders, and I work for a smallish organization, 80 employees, not for profit.
Nash, we're just
what COVID and 2020. Sorry to bang about it. Leaders and people are more.
Your signal's not strong. Hello? We're struggling to hear you. Can we come back to your question in a second when you're in a better zone?
Sure.
Karina or Lani, did you have anything that you wanted to comment on?
I just put some things in the chat, but I think that the opportunity is to really strip things back and make sure that everything that you're doing is aligned to purpose, and not taking too much on is really important, because I think that leads to overwhelm and people don't really know what they're doing in a large organization. So I think shorter planning sprints of 90 days at the moment makes sense.
I've been calling it the Great Spring Clean, or whatever you want to call it, but there is a spring cleaning required around we're trying to do too much, and how do you help organisations strip everything back to its core to allow you to then have kind of clear runway from a resources and time perspective to go, are we focusing on the right things looking forward into the future versus carrying a ton of baggage and expectation from our past that possibly was designed and thought about and approved in a different set of circumstances. So I think, Karina, your point is very helpful in terms of how do you just peel things back to a core and help people get energized about that, reset their focus, and then let them go again.
Katherine, it's Jill here. I'm wondering whether one of your first comments about soft skills is really relevant here, because when you think about the 20th century leadership model that you provided, to transform or to move into that 21st century leadership model, people really need to their capacity needs to be built around how to do the soft skills. And I'm finding in the workplaces that I'm working in as a consultant that some people have got a real lack of that, the soft skill space.
Yeah. And for me, it starts with trust. So,
absolutely.
And trust, ironically, this is the bit that is great about working with psychologists, and then also incredibly frustrating, is that trust is built based on an individual's ability to have courage to be vulnerable with another person. That's actually how trust is created, through a reciprocal moment of shared vulnerability. What is interesting about trust is that for it to be present and built, the underlying capability is courage. And so the conversation that I find myself having much more now is a conversation that says, what is the formula of courage and how do I create more of it for myself and for my leaders? Because the biggest issue that we're going to have in changing the context of leadership is that we get it in our own way. We all, every day, get in our own way. And, you know, it comes back to that saying around everything you want is on the other side of fear. Everything you want is on the other side of something that is really that you've been putting off, that you've been avoiding, that you think is too hard, that it's out there, it's just out here a little bit. And you see people that have the ability to execute, they're the people that work through that fear, have that courage, work through it and grab onto it with two hands. And so the biggest way to unlock that value for yourself and for the people that you work with is to get out of your own way. And the way to do that is to access and create some additional courage for yourself. Had I known there was a formula for courage back when I was leading significantly large teams, like in my 20s and early 30s, I would have been much appreciative. I'm a bit annoyed that it's taken me 40 odd years of life to work out there was a formula and that you can actually consciously create it. So welcome to the very simple version of courage, or the model of creating courage. This is through the work of Cynthia Puri. You can read up on her. It's the psychology framework. It comes from the modern research of ancient virtue. So it goes back to, I'm a big believer in that. If you go back into the history books, you will actually find what you need. Like, humanity has done this before. Leaders have conquered challenges that we cannot imagine before, and there's so much wisdom to be had. And this framework of courage is one of those pieces. The way I like to think about the psychology of courage and building it for yourself as a leader and for other leaders is to imagine yourself as the person that is wanting to go skydiving, but is also terrified about like skydiving. Like, I am definitely in that camp. I just happen to be married to someone that absolutely loves skydiving. And so it just constantly gets surfaced every time he wants to go for a dive. And I'm like, no, this is not me. But here's the reality, right? As a skydiver, you know when you're there and you're putting your gear on, you know that like my purpose is to jump out of a plane and land safely. You have clarity on purpose. You also need to have access to what scares you. In this particular example, I'm scared of dying. Like, I'm scared of my parachute not opening, and I'm going to hurtle to the ground, and it's going to be one of those Darwin Awards around, like, you shouldn't do things that require you to do things that are unnatural. Like, that is absolutely the fear narrative that goes on in my head, to the point where I know my next best action, if I want to overcome that fear and access courage for myself, is to actually go to a guided, like, where I'm not the person in control, like access additional support. I know my next best action is to go skydiving in tandem with an experienced person. And in doing that, I will access courage and I will overcome this fear. I know that that's my next best action, but I choose not to take it. And so because I choose not to take my next best action, I don't access or create courage for myself. And so if I was to flip this, and I'm working with an agile sprint team, and their purpose is to release a new payment options in our company's app, they are absolutely clear on their purpose, that they are to access add a new buy now, pay later option to the payments option on the app. They're clear that that's their purpose. Their fear is they haven't done enough user acceptance testing, and that buy now, pay later is going to be a really popular option, and that because they haven't done enough user acceptance testing, that they are going to turn on buy now, pay later. It's going to be extremely successful, but 1 out of every 2 attempts at closing a sale using buy now, pay later will fail, and it will actually have create a detrimental impact in terms of brand, but also cash flow, and they're not really sure if they should move forward. So quite often we see that there are leaders that have clarity on purpose, and they have clarity on what scares them. They have clarity on the worry, but what they don't have is clarity on what is my next best action to take. Because you don't have to have it fully solved. You just have to have the next best action. And that's where you access courage. So it could be, I'm going to position a conversation with the release leader to say, actually, I don't think we're ready for this release window. I think we need to push back and do another round of user acceptance testing. And in that moment of taking action, they've accessed courage for themselves to do something about it, to do something about honouring the fear and the voice in their head. And the reason why this model is really helpful is that it gives you a chance to recognise where people are at and what you can do to move them to courage and to action. So if I know that purpose and fear are present, I most likely have a leader that is bystanding. They know what they need to do, but they're worried about X, and they're bystanding, waiting for something to come and unblock them. I know if they've got fear in place and they've got action in place, but they don't have purpose, I know that, gosh, they must be really unhappy. Like, work won't be a joy for that person. It'll feel monotonous. They're just swinging between, I'm scared of something and I'm doing something, and I'm scared of something and I'm doing something. It's a really sad environment for that person. It's demotivating, and it would be a detrimental culture if you had a high presence of fear and action, but not purpose to orientate people. And if you've got purpose and action but no fear, like, I hate to tell it to you, but you're a motivated idiot. Like, you have no guardrails. And they're the people that do launch things without the appropriate user acceptance testing, and then they break things that are quite material. So we can all think of those people in our organisation. We can think of the people that are working without purpose. We can think about the people and see the leaders that are bystanding, and we can see the motivated idiots. And our role as leaders is to help them access this whole piece of courage, to allow them to orientate to a more centred way of working, and a more joyful way of working. So I might just pause, because I said that I would come to courage, but now that I've opened the lid, I haven't given you guys an opportunity to have a conversation or ask questions about it.
I just laughed out, probably louder than I should, at motivated idiots. I've certainly stumbled across some of those.
Can I just ask quickly, there was motivated idiots, which I also laughed out loud at, a bystander leader, and what was the third one?
So I'm sure that there's a technical term for it, but I just think of them as incredibly sad people that have no joy because they're in fear and action.
I think that's very technical.
Very sad. So if you find this interesting and you want to go down a rabbit hole on courage, Cynthia Puri is the author of this model. I think that it's an incredibly clever way to think about courage and creating courage, but it also, for me, reinforces the role of leader is about making sure these three ingredients are present. Because without purpose, without fear, and without next best action, you actually cannot access courage. So it might happen very quickly. Like if you think about emergency responders, they're like, okay, assess, purpose, child in the top left window. Am I scared about that fire getting me there? Yes. So I'm going to put a ladder up that side. And what's my next best action? I'm just going to run flying up that ladder and save that child. They do it very much in a much sort of time frame, particularly emergency responders, but they still have all three ingredients present. So for me, that reinforces the need to two things to take away. The first is, if you're working in the purpose space or having a conversation with people and you can realize that purpose isn't present, how do you access that for them and have an anchoring conversation to purpose? But the other, probably more obvious one, is a conversation about fear and what's keeping people up at night and what's worrying people, and what sort of relationship have you created yourself with your own fear? Like, do you talk to it? Do you say, thank you for the call out? Thank you for the watch out. I'm aware that you think I should be worried about this. Now I'm going to process it. So how healthy is that relationship that you have with fear? And are you giving too much control to that fear voice in your head and not enough focus on the next best action, create courage, move on from it for yourself? So what does that mean in terms of how we truly think about the principles that we might want to take forward for 21st century leadership? These are my go-tos. It starts with being grounded in purpose. So an established purpose allows organisations to flex faster. It also requires leaders to really genuinely understand that we are leading through a constant state of context, a perpetual state of moving context right now. That's not going to change for the next couple of years. We're going to be going adjust, stop, start, go again, adjust, stop, start, go again. So you need to over communicate. You need to communicate like you never have before. You need to communicate in 10, 2-minute videos on your iPhone on your walk in the morning going, this is top of mind, and sending it on WhatsApp. You need to follow that up via an email. You need to follow that up by having individual phone calls with individuals that you think, oh, they might be stuck. Like, communication is your currency. Clarity is how you connect people and pull people in. Ideation and experimentation. If you are going to create value, you have to be really comfortable with messy. You have to be really comfortable with making mistakes. 21st century leaders embrace the messy, create some mistakes, but create some amazing things as a byproduct of really going for it. And so a reminder that leadership in the 21st century is creative in a way that a film director is, or a composer, or a painter, or an architect. You are architecting the future of organisations and services and products that we consume in the community. So remember, it's a creative role, and how much time you're spending on building that muscle. One of the interesting things about the last 12 months, and that we've seen, and I think that this has been a very big acceleration, has been the balance of how much time I spend inside my organisation, or inside my role, or inside my function and team, and how much of it do I spend outside in the market, in the world, understanding. I think the VID conference is a wonderful example of people trying to get out and access that outside in thinking. The more connected your ecosystem is in a balanced way of outside in thinking and inside thinking, that has the breadth of your organization versus the silo of your function, the more sustainable the actual thought leadership and wisdom that comes your way. So you're actually, when you're wondering about things or marinating about things or getting articles sent to you, you're getting a real diversity of thought and you're doing something with it. And finally, organizations will thrive when leaders understand that the lever that they have to pull to lift capability is through increasing diversity. Diversity and inclusion is a superpower that, if leaders are attending to it for compliance reasons, for saving, for their image, for their organizational image, that's not the game. The game that I am seeing on global successful unicorns, and I regularly am taking teams to Israel and Silicon Valley. Last week, I was there with a team, one of Australia's largest banks, and I can tell you those teams are that are going from zero valuation to $1 billion in under 12 months and under 2 years. They're doing it with a globally dispersed, diverse team of talented individuals of various backgrounds. One organisation I met with had a maths teacher, a music composer, and a coder. And they set off creating, and I talk about it all the time, a technology company that Mercedes-Benz bought out, and it now does all of the sat-nav on Mercedes-Benz. Who would have thought that a music composer, a maths teacher, and a computer coder would be the skills required to build that level of innovation? But it was. So if you are hiring people that are the same as you, recruiting the same as you, investing the same as you are missing the trick when it comes to building capability of your team to go fast. So before I open up to final questions, I just think these are the principles I want you to take forward. I'll make sure I put them in a little kind of summary toolkit from today's session so that you can take that forward in your organizations. But my final thought before we leave is that there's no steady state at the moment. And I just want more leaders that I work with to be really comfortable with the fact that the steady state is you. The thing that you have control of is you. How you think, how you feel, how you manage your energy, how you invest your energy into creating energy for others. And I just encourage you to really understand that as a leader, the thing you do have control of is how you observe, how you reimagine what's possible, the decisions that you make, the pivots and choices that you make, and that when something else happens or the next disruption happens, you just know that you go back to the beginning and repeat. And that's the constant. This is the constant that I want you to hold on to say that we as leaders, the thing that we absolutely have control on is how we decide and craft the future for ourselves and our organizations. And that is the constant that will be a source of inspiration and energy for 2021.